Hello, and welcome to this e-course on circularity in public transport, building a circular mobility system together by 2050. My name is Monique, and I work as a policy advisor at the Transport Authority for the Amsterdam region. We collaborate with 14 municipalities with the goal of creating a region that is accessible and traffic safe, while taking sustainability, inclusivity, and health into account. Personally, I focus on sustainable and circular mobility and biodiversity in relation to mobility. We are living in a consumer society. To meet our needs, we buy a lot of products, and nowadays that's made very easy. More and more stores offer products at low prices. Order today, deliver tomorrow. Attractive Black Friday deals that convince us that we simply must buy things because it's such a good deal. And all those purchases require a lot of raw materials, even more than our planet can provide. If everyone on Earth lived like the average Dutch person, we would need 3.6 planets to meet our consumption needs. And that's a problem because we only have one planet. This image shows the Earth Overshoot Day. This is the day on which we have used more resources than the planet can regenerate in 1 year. Globally, this day falls on July 24th. For the Netherlands, it falls on May 5th. But last year it was on the 1st of April. It looks like a shift in the right direction, which may indicate that the efforts towards a circular economy are starting to pay off. Until recently, we were most familiar with linear economy. We produce goods using raw materials. We buy and use them until they break and we no longer want them, and then we throw them away. In a circular economy, things work a bit differently. Everything we would throw away in a linear economy is seen as a new resource in a circular economy. Raw materials remain part of the closed loop and are reused again and again. We don't throw anything away because waste doesn't exist. In nature, waste doesn't exist either. It's something we humans have created, and that means we are also responsible for finding smart ways to reuse it. When we look at the public transport sector, public transportation is, by definition, already a form of circularity. It's a form of shared mobility. Fewer cars are needed to transport the same number of people, which means more efficient use of the vehicles. In addition, public transport is already becoming increasingly sustainable. Think of all the zero-emission buses that are now in operation and the growing use of green electricity. All in all, we are already making great progress in making public transport more sustainable, but there's still room for improvement when it comes to circularity. The public transport sector uses a large amount of raw materials. Take, for example, the materials needed to build a bus. They include various types of metal, plastic components, glass, rubber, but increasingly also critical metals needed for the production of batteries and electronic systems in the vehicles. Last year, the Dutch public transport sector mapped out how circular a bus actually is. This analysis looked at both the input of secondary raw materials and the potential for recycling at the end of the bus life cycle. And currently, about 16% of the materials in buses can be considered circular. That's a promising start, but there's still room for improvement in this area. And there are different ways to do this. When people think of circularity, they often think of recycling first, something we're already quite familiar with. We separate our waste and it's processed by the waste companies into new products. But in a circular economy, there are also other ways to use raw materials more intelligently. These are outlined in the principles of the so-called R-ladder. The idea is the higher up the ladder you go, the more value and quality the circular strategy has. At the very top, it's about smart product design. Do you really need the product, or can it be designed in a more modular way? In the middle, it's about reuse or repair to extend the product's lifespan. How can you give products a second life, or can parts be reused? And at the bottom of the ladder, it's about recycling raw materials and recovering energy from residual products. All these steps help us to move towards a society without waste. In practice, we can already see great examples of this. These help make the concept tangible and show the real-world impact. We start at the top of the ladder with refuse and rethink. This step is essentially about reducing consumption. consciously choosing not to buy or produce something unless it's truly necessary. And if something is produced or purchased, it should be designed in a smart and sustainable way from the start. In the mobility sector, we already see many examples of rethink being applied. For example, this composite body of vehicles. The sidewalls of some buses are now made entirely of composite material instead of steel. Composite consists of various components and has a fibrous structure, and the benefits are that less material is needed to construct the vehicle body. It's lighter in weight, so you reduce energy while using it, and it's easy to repair in case of damage. Instead of replacing the entire sidewall, only a small section needs to be replaced. And in the production process, there's always leftover materials like cutting waste or panels that get damaged, and these residual materials are repurposed into new products, like this rain barrel. The leftover composite is no longer strong enough to be used in a bus wall due to the fiber structure, but it's still perfectly suitable for producing a functional product like this rain barrel. A fun circular innovation in buses and trams is the wireless stop button. This button uses a mechanism where the pressure from being pushed generates enough energy to send a signal to the driver's dashboard. With this system, no wiring is needed for the stop buttons, which is saving dozens of meters of cable per vehicle. That's significant, especially considering that cables contain many critical raw materials such as copper, silver, and aluminum. And another benefit is that the buttons can easily be repositioned or reused, increasing their flexibility and lifespan. However, we should also remain critical of these kinds of innovation. These buttons likely contain transmitters to wirelessly connect with the driver's cabin. That may mean new types of critical raw materials are needed to make the system work. So we must carefully consider the overall environmental impact of such developments. On the one hand, they solve an existing problem, but on the other hand, they might create new challenges. Circularity is not just about innovation, but also about weighing trade-offs and making informed decisions. Another example of rethink are the modular bus shelters. In 2020, we conducted a tender for new bus shelters in 3 municipalities. Sustainability played an important role in this process. Almost all of the materials used in the shelters are reusable once the stops reach their end-of-life cycle. The shelters are designed modularly, making them easy to dismantle and simply to repair if parts break. Additionally, the foundation of the shelter can remain in place when the shelter itself needs to be replaced, saving a significant amount of raw material and energy. The next step is reuse. This step is about reducing the raw materials or cutting down on production. Again, it requires smart use of resources to make reduction possible. A good example of this is sharing facilities. In 2020, the new charging infrastructure at Amsterdam Central Station was put into operation. These charging stations are designed and installed in a way that allows other vehicles to use them in the future. Currently, the chargers are already used by different public transport operators, which make efficient use of the facility. By organizing it this way, fewer charging stations are needed to charge buses from different congestion areas. So we're moving down the ladder to reuse. Products that are no longer in use are reused in a way they were originally intended. Our national train operator, the NS, is a front runner when it comes to circularity. They recycle 99% of the materials from old trains that have been decommissioned and reuse a large portion of these materials in new trains. They have also developed the so-called Harvest Book. Old trains are completely stripped down, and parts that are still in good condition are locked in this Harvest Book. For example, on this picture, it shows that over 8,000 sidewall panels are available. These panels can be reused in new trains or in other applications. By carefully tracking which parts are available, it becomes easier to actually use them in new products. Then, the reselling of vehicles. Take the tram, for example. It's an old GVB tram out of Amsterdam. In 2008, the old trams were relocated to Bosnia and Herzegovina. These trams were decommissioned because they no longer met the standards here in the Netherlands, but they could still be used for some time. This happens often in the public transport sector. Old vehicles that no longer meet the local requirement or are decommissioned are sold to countries with less strict regulations. This way, the vehicle continued to be used for their intended purpose, transporting people. On one hand, this is a great form of circularity, but on the other hand, the raw materials leave our own circular system. We lose control over these materials even when the tram reaches the end of their life cycle. Here we see an example of reusing batteries. With the arrival of electric buses, the number of batteries also increased. When batteries are no longer strong enough to be used in buses, they can be repurposed for other uses. Public transport operators recently conducted a pilot project with used batteries. At some point, these batteries are no longer powerful enough to keep buses running, but they are still suitable for other applications, such as stationary batteries. In these pictures, you see the gray box, which is essentially one large battery made up of multiple bus batteries. These batteries are used as an additional electricity storage, helping to prevent overloading of the power grid during the peak times. Then we move on to the fourth step of the ladder, repair and refurbishment. This involves life-extending maintenance on vehicles. It's something transport operators have been doing for a long time, and it helps vehicles to last longer. When the design of the vehicle already takes this type of maintenance into account, they become even more easier to maintain and have an extended lifespan. And when products can no longer be reused or repaired, we move on to recycling. Raw materials are recovered from products and used to make new products. I just spoke about the national train operator, NS. Some of the materials and parts from old trains can no longer be reused in trains themselves. That's why NS came up with a smart solution. They make other products from the leftover materials, just like the rain barrel. For example, at the office where I work, there's a ping pong table made from old train parts. Even the ping pong paddles are made from old train information boards. And this shows that circularity can sometimes be found in unexpected places, and that the market already has a lot to offer in this area. And now we've reached the bottom step of the ladder, a step you would ideally want to avoid because most of the raw materials are lost here. In a circular economy, this step should be used less and less. However, energy is recovered from materials during this process. It can include biogas, heat, or electricity. And smartly capturing energy that would otherwise be lost can also be seen as a part of this step. In Amsterdam, for example, the braking energy from the metro is captured and fed back into the power grid. This way, a residual product is put to good use, whereas in many cases it will simply be lost. Because many parties in the public transport sector want to become more sustainable, we have joined the forces. This year the Circular Public Transport Covenant was signed. All public transport authorities, bus operators and the national government signed this covenant. The joint goal is to achieve 100% circular public transport by 2050. And to achieve this, the sector will focus on reducing the use of raw materials, replacing raw materials with sustainable alternatives such as bio-based materials, extending the lifespan of products, high-quality processing of raw materials at the end of their life cycle. The covenant is signed, and now it's time to get to work. We will focus on the themes of vehicles, concession granting, and infrastructure. And together, we will explore what more the sector can do in the transition towards a circular system. Collaboration is essential. Sharing knowledge, gaining experience, and conducting research will help us to achieve this. And with that, we've reached the end of this e-course. I want to thank you all for your attention, and I hope I have inspired you to start working with circularity yourself. If you have any questions, my contact details are in the beginning of this presentation. Thank you.